Hello again. Welcome to the rantings and ravings of orchestral preparation. Today we'll be discussing Schumann's Third Symphony. Schumann wrote his Third Symphony in January 11th, 1941, he finished it. Obviously, writing a symphony takes a very long time. Premiered by the Boston Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Sergei Kusevitsky. I'm going to go with that pronunciation and roll with it. Robert Schumann was a German composer born in June 8th, 1810, and he died, sadly, due to what was diagnosed as psychotic melancholia on July 29th, 1856. Robert Schumann was originally going to try to go into law. However, his piano teacher told him he would be, and I quote, one of the greatest piano players alive. Sadly, that dream was shattered with a hand injury. So he devoted all of his musical energy towards composing. Very nice. And part of that start was he married his wife Clara Wykes. I'm gonna go with that Clara Wykes, who was a prodigal pianist at the time. Beyond that, about his bio, here we will move on. He's mainly known for writing piano music, some orchestral work, and lots of lieder. When we, as I pull up the score, or the at least the excerpt, we're talking about the chorale and the kind of solo section for the bass trombone that happens at the beginning of the fourth movement of his Rhenish Symphony. So when I look at the score, and again, as opposed to my last video, we're gonna put the part of the score up there. We see a lot of slurs. I see pianissimo. I see two fortes in total, but there's a crescendo. Nacht und nach sich. I can't really read that from here. So this is a very restrained sort of piece of music. We're not going to be going very loud. We're not going to be very bombastic. In fact, when the performer plays this, he doesn't play, or he or she does not play, for the first three movements of the piece. So we are coming in super soft, basically on cold instruments. So kind of replicating, trying to get the warmest sound we can from cold. When we play this excerpt, the goal is to be as smooth as possible. We see that with slurs, and that our breaths should be chosen carefully. In performance of this piece with an orchestra, breathing isn't necessarily a huge deal for the bass trombonist, but when we're auditioning, it's very noticeable. So to truly communicate the musical interpretation of this piece, we only breathe when we're pretty much loud. So if I look at the part, we have one breath mark after the two measure mark where there's not a slur, and then after that phrase ends, we have time to breathe, and you can technically breathe right before A, going into the forte, and then obviously breathe in between the forte. That's a little too much detail, but there are times to break the rules, and generally when we prepare this excerpt, we might even kind of disregard where Schumann wrote where we could breathe. He didn't write a breath mark, obviously. He just did not slur these two notes. So when we're looking at what's written as solo for the bass trombone, when we're having the theme play out for us with the cellos, we generally don't breathe before the B flat on the top. So we don't breathe before that last note. We go through the entire suspension. So and so on and so forth. I didn't really pick a note, so we ignore the fact that technically that's all slurred, and we breathe there. So, and things to keep in mind if one is preparing this excerpt. There aren't, as I said with Wagner, there aren't too many interpretations. It's because it's just so soft, and when the cellos play during the solo part, you can't hear the bass trombone anyway. It's mainly just a supporting character. But there are certain ways we can talk about how do we interpret the bass line that we play at the beginning. We know that it's supposed to be representative of like bishops marching to church. It's kind of like if you're thinking if you want to draw a comparison to people I know, Monty Python's sketch from the Holy Grail. where we had all the priests slash bishops just sorry, I said the mic. And we kind of want to replicate that, but actually seriously, not in a kind of joke, not in any sort of ironic sense. So we can have the debate of whether it is whether you should sort of not accent, but like sort of separate each of these notes a little bit, just make them feel defined, like they're steps, or if you just want them to be one free flowing thing, like you don't really see people walking, you see people kind of floating across. Personally, I'm a proponent. I am for the floating sensation of this piece of music. It feels a lot better listening to it that way and performing it that way. So, yeah. While I have time, it's basically all the things about interpreting this excerpt. At the end, anytime this piece has forte, it's not, of course, a real forte. It's an implied forte. It's more of a feeling. So when we see forte, it's less that you're gonna hit the note forte and then decrescendo, like it says. You're kind of gonna like accent it a little hard and then pull back. And then obviously at the end of this excerpt, we have like a solo part with the cellos. And when we're getting to the end, you kind of want to be a nice forte, nice beautiful like singing forte. There really is only one marking in terms of articulation, and it's the marcato on the F. And I would recommend making a point of that as the performer. It helps the case a lot. Although you can also kind of downplay it, just listen up to the cellos. If you're performing this piece, you're preparing the excerpt, I recommend playing the marcato as marcato. In preparing this excerpt as a player, the one thing to do if you're to work on time, because this is a very slow movement, is to set your metronome to the eighth note, not the quarter note. It'll more ingrain a sense of time with you, and it'll feel like it wants to move. You're not going to get stuck kind of feeling like you're behind the beat. You still want to be on the beat as you go. And then when we get to the solo part, we have a couple suspensions, and how important are the suspensions is generally, I think, up to you as a performer. I would play into the suspension a lot more. So, I don't know if that came across, but the idea is like you want to play the E flat a little bit with a bit more gusto than the D natural that follows it. The resolution isn't as important as the tension, at least in my opinion. Oh, excuse me. A little bit of mucus. Then when we want to play, we have this part, and on top of what's the main theme of this movement, we see solo. And of course, solo isn't necessarily true, right? You're playing with the cellos. It's being played. The theme's being passed around everywhere, and you're playing with like the basses and cellos. It's just this big low part. If there is a tuba, I believe the tuba might have it. I'm not sure. But we don't want to necessarily play, and I'll play it this way when I'm demonstrating the excerpts. We don't want to play it like a soloist per se. We want to play it inside of a section. If we play it too loud, it becomes kind of menacing, or it doesn't come on. It kind of ruins the beauty that is this theme. So keep that in mind when we're in something that I work on when I play this excerpt, to be able to work on my breathing, working on how my phrases are lengthed, is to play it down an octave, because if I can do it down an octave in the two measure phrases that it wants, I can do it at octave and breathe where I want, and sound beautiful throughout the piece. So I think that's about it in terms of covering. We want to make sure everything is slurred. We want to make sure everything is smooth. And we want to make sure the forte is not super loud. And my third playthrough of this excerpt will demonstrate sort of things you don't want to fall into, the pitfalls, as an audition performer. So yeah, I think we're gonna move on to performing it. I will do my first interpretation will be everything is more like walking. It's like you can see the bishops walking, so every note kind of has its own thing. Like we're kind of following the vein of how the basses pluck the bass line, as I'm just playing it super long. We're not gonna actually pluck them obviously, but we're gonna give that idea of like every note's a step, and then we're gonna play the solo. We're gonna play the solo with the resolution being more important on the suspensions. And then on the second playthrough, we will play it personally my correct way, or not my way is correct. It's more of the more correct way that I've been taught is to play every note super smooth, as if the bishops were floating. Make sure the forte is still a very solid, just accented note, and then the tension in these suspensions are more important than the resolutions. And obviously the ending melody the ending melody we're gonna I'm gonna play a little bit out. We're gonna marcato that F. I think the first one we won't really marcato as much, but we're gonna put a nice solid marcato on that F to make it very important. So that's clearly an arrival kind of note before the E flat. Oh, excuse me as I carry on.